This is the paint scheme for the underground brick sections. You'll notice the floor color is different from the walls. To do this, we have to paint the walls and the floor separately, then glue them on and then apply the final wash. This video is going to give you a brief overview of how we're going to do this, and then it's going to give you a complete list of the paints and materials we need for this paint job. The videos following this one are going to give all of these steps in detail. The first step will be to undercoat the walls with white paint. This is necessary because the red wash is a transparent color, and unless you put white down, the red's not going to show up. Once the white is dry, the next step will be to paint on the red wash and wipe up the drips. This wash will flow into the cracks and enhance the texture of the bricks. For the floors, I'm painting on the basic dirt color over the floor tiles. Once this is dry, a lighter color of dirt is dry brushed lightly over the surface to bring out the texture. Once this highlight is dry, an ink wash is painted over this. Here you can see the difference before and after the ink wash is applied. Next, the walls are glued down onto the floor sections. Now a final wash is applied over the walls, extending onto the floor somewhat. Immediately after, I'm using a baby wipe to wipe up the excess of this wash so it only darkens the shadows and the cracks. This is what the sections look like after painting them. Okay, here are the basic paints and materials we're going to need for the brick paint job. And I'm going to go over these individually, but let me just give you a quick rundown. First, we're going to need some sort of white paint to paint underneath of the brick so that the red will show. We're going to need red Oxide acrylic artist 2 paint for the red color of the brick. We're going to need a color of dirt for the dirt color of the floor. We're going to need Sepia ink of some kind. We're going to need matte fluid medium, which will give it a matte texture and also help the paint flow. We're also going to use a slow-dri fluid retarder so that our ink wash doesn't dry on us while we're trying to work with it. You're also going to need some sort of teaspoon measures to measure this stuff, some plastic cups to mix it in, a paintbrush to paint it on, and we're also going to need some baby wipes so we can wipe some of the excess stain off. Now we'll have to undercoat the pieces in white to get the red to show up properly. So it's up to you what kind of white paint you want to use. I would probably avoid using this acrylic 2 paint because it's kind of hard to mix up because it's thick. But if you don't have any other choice and you're in the art store already, you can use that. Instead, I would just go with either flat white house paint or go with white acrylic craft paint. This is probably the easiest to get a hold of, and just go with it. But if you already have a quart of white house paint sitting around and you don't want to go out and buy this, well then go ahead and use the white house paint. Now for the red color, we're going to use red Oxide acrylic artist 2 paint. I strongly suggest that you get the tube paint. Don't get the cheap red craft paint because it does not have the richness of color, and the formula is going to be kind of thrown off if you try to use this stuff instead. Now for the floors, we are going to need a dirt color of paint. Now on the website, I list different brands and recipes of this dirt color, but it's possible that your hardware store or a paint store is not going to have the same brands that I list on the website. I can also mail you a paint chip of some kind so you can match up the color. But if you can't find this or get it mixed, the easiest way to mix a dirt color is simply get Artist Acrylic 2 paint Raw Umber. Raw Umber is the perfect dirt color. What you'll have to do is you'll have to mix it with a little bit of white paint, and I will give you the recipe later on in these instructions. But if you have trouble finding or mixing up a good dirt color paint, Raw Umber is the perfect color of Artist Acrylic 2 paint. Now one of the key ingredients I'm using here is Sepia India Ink. Inks allow you to keep the color nice and strong even when they're thin. So I can use this to thin paint and it won't really weaken the color, but it'll still thin the paint. And it's also great for washes. And a lot of these textures that we're trying to do, we really need to use a wash rather than painting and dry brushing. Now sometimes you may have difficulty getting Sepia India Ink. If you can't really find it anywhere, you can make your own, and you can make it out of cheap liquid food coloring. I just got this from the grocery store at Walmart, and what these are the different just colors of liquid in tubes here. Now if you want to mix your own, the recipe is really easy. Just use the red and the green food coloring, and what you're going to do is you're going to have 1 part of the green food coloring, 2 parts of the red food coloring. And what you'll do is you'll just mix these up in a little cup here, and let me show you the difference between the two on how these look. Now, as far as India ink, it's always a good idea to mix up your India ink. In other words, once it sits in the bottle, it's going to kind of, what do you call it, settle. The pigment is going to kind of settle down in the bottom. So I would take it and I would kind of stir it up a little bit. And this is kind of the color that the Sepia India ink is going to be. And if we go ahead and paint that down, that's kind of the color we're getting. Let me kind of put that on there. So that's the color of the Sepia India ink. And this right here next to it is the color of the food coloring that I've got. Let me wash my brush out real quick here. And the food coloring, if we dip it into here and paint it on, this food coloring here is, like I said, one part green food coloring and the other part red food coloring. And if you compare these, they're not a whole lot different as far as the food coloring may end up being a little bit darker or stronger than your sepia. But like I said, be sure to mix up or stir up your sepia ink in the bottle, or you're not going to get the color correctly. So you can use either one of those. If you do happen to use the food coloring, you may have to be careful and kind of spray a sealer coat on your piece when you get done, because even though it dries like this, it may not be waterproof. In other words, later on, if for some reason your piece gets wet, this food coloring may want to run if you don't seal the piece. But inks are meant to dry waterproof so that you don't have that problem. Now the next ingredient we've got is matte fluid medium. Now what these words mean: matte means that it is matte texture and it will dry matte and not be glossy. Fluid means that this is a fluid, kind of like heavy cream. So if you open it up and pour it out and put a drip out, that's kind of the consistency of what this is. And medium means that this is a glue that's going to glue the pigment down. In other words, if you take regular paint and thin it enough with water, there's not going to be enough stuff there to hold that pigment down to whatever you're painting on. So a medium is basically a type of a glue that will stick that pigment down. So you can thin your paint and it will still stay on whatever it is you're painting it on. Now these are both Liquitex products, and at first they confused me because this is their basic set and it says matte fluid medium. And also they have one that's just called matte medium. It doesn't say fluid on it anywhere. But when I checked it, it really is pretty much the same stuff. It seems to be slightly thicker, but it's pretty much the same. The biggest difference I found is this sucker right here is $9, and this one here is $16. So if you can find the basic version of the matte fluid medium, it'll save you some money. But it's really exactly the same thing. And if you can't find Liquitex brand, I'm sure that there are other brands of artist acrylic supplies that would be a matte fluid medium or a matte medium. This last ingredient I think is an important one. What this is this is called Slow-dri fluid retarder. It's a fluid and it's really like water, and what you do is you use it as water whenever you're thinning paint. And what it does is it retards the drying of the paint. So when we're mixing up washes and we're mixing up things and we're painting it on, this will give you time to wipe it off or to wipe up drips without the paint or without the stain skinning over. So this one I think is a really important ingredient. Don't skip it. If you absolutely can't find it, I guess you'll just have to use water instead. But I've had really good luck with this, being able to work on a whole wall section and then mop up the drips or wipe up the excess with baby wipes and such without the paint skinning over.